So today, I'll be talking about how life without parole sentences expand our understandings of how sexual violence operates as structural violence, both within prisons and throughout the carceral landscape. And I forgot to say, my name is Rosie Stockton. I'm in the Gender Studies program at UCLA. So while all people serving LWOP, life without parole, which I'll be referring to as LWOP as just shorthand, exist at the intersection of disposability and exploitation. In this presentation, I look specifically at the testimonies and organizing of people serving LWOP in California women's prisons, where the majority of the LWOP population are survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. The organizing efforts around gendered and sexual violence inside, documented in these testimonies, were crucial in catalyzing the Drop LWOP campaign, a statewide coalitional grassroots effort working to end life without parole. So a little background on LWOP sentences. They're known inside by people serving LWOP and their loved ones as a living death penalty or death by incarceration, and these sentences were rare before 1972. When the death penalty was ruled unconstitutional, states such as California adopted LWOP as the humane alternative. But as the Drop LWOP campaign argues, these sentences are anything but humane and are part of a culture of extreme sentencing. In California, over 30% of people over 30% of incarcerated people are serving a life sentence, and about 5,200 of these are serving life without the possibility of parole. There are many sentencing trends that criminalize poor people of color disproportionately in these circumstances, and they have particularly harsh repercussions for people in women's prisons in California, where 90% of those serving LWOP are sentenced under the felony murder rules aider and abetter sentence enhancement. Kelly Savage, whose LWOP sentence was commuted in 2017 and is now a Drop LWOP coordinator for the California Coalition of Women's Prisoners, explains this well in an interview published as part of a Living Chance storytelling to end life without parole. Here, Kelly says that in the initial organizing meetings of people serving LWOP inside the Central California Women's Facility, quote, allowed us to see that most LWOPs were first-time offenders and survivors of some type of abuse. Most were here under sentences for felony murder and therefore not actual perpetrators of their crime, end quote. Importantly is the insights and realizations from these initial meetings of people serving LWOP inside that created the foundation of the Drop LWOP campaign. In addition to navigating a culture of sexual violence that permeates the prison, these testimonies reveal that people serving LWOP face constant discrimination in accessing programs and jobs inside. People serving LWOP are often only eligible for jobs that pay the lowest hourly wage, currently 8 cents an hour, and I can explain more a little bit later in the Q&A why that is. And while being required to pay restitution they cannot afford. These low-wage jobs are managed by the Department of Corrections and include jobs like custodial work, maintenance, laundry, groundskeeping, food service, and many other forms of work that fall under the category of reproductive labor. In yet another testimony, Kelly Savage tells us that even while being excluded from the majority of education classes, self-help groups, and jobs, people serving LWOP are the, quote, backbone of the prison. This is apparent in the types of labor they have access to, the mentorship and leadership roles they provide to their peers, and even in the staff's reliance on them for knowledge and insight into the inner workings of the prison. According to Ellen Richardson, who is serving an LWOP sentence in California, quote, the biggest role LWOPs play is that we are the constant force that moves the prison because we're always going to be there. Judith Barnett, another woman serving LWOP, offers insight into the intergenerational mentorship roles people serving LWOP provide inside. Quote, people form families in prison, she says. Quote, I have 200 kids who call me Bubby or Mom. The testimonies of Ellen, Judith, and Kelly attest to the contradiction people serving LWOP face. They are simultaneously responsible for foundational aspects of the social reproduction and maintenance of the prison, while at the same time institutionally exploited and barred from, quote, rehabilitation. Given the fact that the majority of people serving LWOP in women's prisons are survivors of sexual violence, and once inside the prison they are depended on to reproduce and maintain social life, the conditions under which they are initially criminalized are replicated inside, revealing how sexual violence underpins structural state violence of the prison. So the legacies of sexual violence as a structural disciplinary tool of terror and exploitation recall the work of scholar and activist Angela Davis in her Black feminist intervention into social reproduction theory. Davis, who also faced either the death penalty or life imprisonment in 1971 for 3 capital charges, one of which was aiding and abetting, which the majority of LWOP, people serving LWOP now are charged, published Reflection of the Black Woman's Role in the Community of Slaves while she was being held at the Marin County Jail waiting for trial in December 1971. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up here, but in this essay, Davis clarifies how Black women's domestic work and social reproduction of the slave community was a site of insurgent resistance met in turn by disciplining force of what Davis calls counterinsurgent sexual violence. So in this project, I'm reading Davis's characterization of the sexual violence as counterinsurgent, alongside the testimonies of those surviving LWOP inside California prisons, to argue that this helps us understand the relationship between sexual violence, reproductive labor, and resistance. So in the larger version of this paper, I'm attending more to the penal codes and laws, such as the felony murder law, to think about how aiding and abetting laws are a sort of criminalization of social reproductive labor at the level of committing a crime, and that then the social reproduction of those serving LWOP are forced onto family members and loved ones, that to help pay restitution, and like things like this inside. So I'll stop there and look forward to continue talking with you all.